Good evening. Welcome to the Shaker Lane School Building Committee meeting,
Hold on.
September 13th, 2023. Um, this meeting, Ryan and Steve Venuti are going to give us updates on the process. And Ryan, you want to take it away?
Okay. Steve, can you release so I can share my screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to get Kelly in. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Just trying to send it. All right, try it, Kelly. You should get it. And then, okay, Kelly, I gotta go. And hold on. Sorry. All right, try that. Ryan, sorry about that.
Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, can you enlarge it a little bit?
I will do so. So, that's too much. Okay. So we received a response back from Turner Townsend Harry, from Chuck Adam, who's going to be our representative on this project. And they came back with a price proposal of $285,000, which I'm showing here on the screen. So as they say in their letter, they are estimating that OPM fees in the past few years range roughly from $225,000 to $500,000. So that is the figure that they provided. They did, in addition to that, provide us with, and this is actually information from the MSBA website, and I'm going to go back a little bit on this, but you can see what the manner in which they used as comps was to look at the owner's project manager and specifically the feasibility amounts here, and use those as comps for this particular project. So along those lines, and again, you'll see these are projects that are, Randolph, Westfield, Hingham, and then these are the different consultants. 297,500, 440,000, 280,000, etc. So, so we took that information, and what we tried to do, is to basically take that, put it into a spreadsheet with the communities, and get a sense about what those OPM amounts average to. So over here in column K, we've got the mean and the median here. Average was about 318,000, and the median was about 289,000. So again, Turner Townsend Harry's proposal is 285,000. So roughly speaking, we are in the ballpark for that. So I had a chance to talk a little earlier today with Steve Moore, and Steve had suggested us asking for the team from Turner Townsend Harry to provide a little bit more information, and sort of see the whole ground up perspective of how they came up with that number. We're still waiting to see that, but it would appear, at least from a big picture perspective, that the $285,000 seems to be a reasonable figure. So does that make sense? Any questions so far? Okay.
Ryan, on that, just for comparison's sake, what is the current Shaker Lane enrollment, just to compare to those numbers?
It's about 450.
450. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. 450. So yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think we were trying to struggle with, okay, if you have a figure of 845 or 315, how commensurate is that to what the feasibility study should cost? So we're thinking it's probably, you take the Westfield project, for example, it seems like that might be a commensurate comp for us to use. So roughly speaking, we think the 285 seems to be reasonable on its face, but we're waiting for a little bit more information because, as you may remember, the Shaker Lane School Building Committee had authorized Steve, Mark, and myself to go forward and negotiate this agreement, and we only got this information from Turner Townsend Heery just this past Monday. So you look at the information you're looking at; it's pretty fresh. So. With that said, we also have to budget for the designer side of the feasibility study. That's where the lion's share of the work's going to be taking place, where they're going to be looking at the alternatives between rehabilitating the building or a new build potentially. So this is really, on this line is really where those same comps are really the figures that we need to also account for. So if I look at, we look at the same thing here in terms of doing an average and then the median. These are all both fairly close, roughly 700,000 to 725,000. So what we then had to analyze, because right now we have $700,000, and you can see that down here from the May 2nd, 2022 annual town meeting, set aside for what we hope to be all of the expenses associated with that, and looking at what Turner Townsend Heery's proposal came in as the OPM, and what we anticipate might be the additional cost on the basic services from the design side of things. We think we might be a little bit short. So in reviewing this with Steve Venuti, we took a look at this average up here and decided to sort of take a really, what we hope to be as a conservative stance and put in an $800 figure here for what we think the designer services might be on this project. Conservative, but be that as it may. If we add up these two figures, which is the Turner Townsend Heery proposal plus the $800,000 estimate, that's a total of $1,085,000. So as I mentioned earlier, however, we only have $700,000 available, which leaves us a potential shortfall of $385,000 for this project. So fortunately, we have a special town meeting that is arriving around the corner that's taking place on November November 1st. And so we had talked about, Steve and myself, Steve Venuti, I should say, looked at the possibility of basically that the $385,000 coming from the raise and appropriate column. Basically, after we ended the budget process, the state aid figures came in, and they came in about $500,000 higher than what we were projecting. So it's a good news story, and we were hoping that we can use some of those monies toward this project to cover the potential shortfall. The hope here is that we'll have sufficient funds to be able to cover the expense. We also know that of the $700,000, we are going to be entitled to our reimbursement rate of 48.68% on that too. But the idea is to have all those funds available, and any reimbursement we then receive would then basically shift back over to the bucket to fund the project. So, so with that said, I'm going to stop my share and ask if anybody has any questions.
Okay. I have a question just about the, so can you re-explain? So we have some state funding that will cover this deficit where we don't need to ask for it at town meeting?
Right. So Stacy, when we developed our fiscal year 2024 budget, we ended our process and basically, okay, our budget was set. after the budget was essentially established, we had the final figures come in from state aid, and that state aid was about $500,000 higher than what we had budgeted. So with that additional cushion, we're proposing to fund the $385,000 deficit out of what we call a raise and appropriate, to be able to put money aside for the feasibility study for both the design and the OPM on this project.
Okay, all right.
But
Great.
you still need to go to town meeting, right?
That's correct. So this would be one of the articles that you would, that everyone we're proposing for the upcoming town meeting.
So we need town meeting for people to vote yes, that we can use that state aid for the additional, okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's monies that are available to us now, because the revenue situation changed from after we closed the budget. So we're basically trying to target that particular funding for this project. There were a few other smaller projects, things that we are also looking to fund out of that, but this is the lion's share of where that how that funding would be allocated.
Great, thank you.
It's kind of like money we found in the couch cushions.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
We just have to,
Yeah. It's one of those rare
my
times.
couch have to get off this call, but but we have to ask town meeting if they're okay with us spending it this way. Essentially.
Correct. That's right. I did see there's a Gary Brock. I had a hand up, the virtual hand up at some point. So I don't know if that's a member who Gary is, but
no, sorry, that was a mistake. Didn't mean to do that.
Oh, okay. All right. Didn't want to leave you out, Gary. So,
Excuse me, Brian.
Yep.
Gary, can you identify yourself, because we need to put you in the meeting minutes?
Sure. I'm Gary Brock. I'm with HMFH Architects. So we're interested in following what's happening and seeing what's going on with you guys.
Very good, thanks.
Yep.
So, just to kind of sum up from that, we have a potential funding source and an estimated amount as to what we believe we will need to further the project. Been speaking with MSBA. It looks like we at this point, we are not going to make the October 2nd MSBA meeting. They instead have offered to us to come before them for the November 6th meeting. But that also means that that Steve Moore and I have to work through the MSBA, the packet basically, that we frankly haven't started on, but we have to be able to come up with a solid figure with Turner Townsend hearing, and then proceed forward so that we're essentially presenting this to the MSBA board at their now November 6th meeting for their approval. So we'll be moving forward with that as well. So things continue to move, and I think the main thing, and I think Steve Moore had alluded to this, I think tonight would be to see if we could get a vote to support that the request to I guess would be the select board and the finance committee to supplement the funding for the project in the amount of $385,000 to from via raise and appropriate from the FY24 budget.
Does it make sense? I don't know timing wise what makes more sense, but there's the figures you shared, Ryan. I think the logic was sound about how you guys evaluated this, but there's potentially a large swing in the architectural services numbers from 400. I guess my point is there's a potential that this may not even be an issue, or maybe a much smaller than $300,000+ issue. Does it make sense to wait until that is more of a known, or does it need to be done now?
So this is part of the problem, Brian, and the way that the local government's structured. If I would say that the city of Lowell, right? They basically have city council meetings, and they have the equivalent of basically town meeting every 2 weeks when they meet, so they can make those statements. We don't have that luxury. Thus, I think that when we were having the conversation earlier with Steve Benuti, Kelly, Steve Mark, and Steve Moore, I think what we're talking about is trying to be able to put enough into this account or essentially the set aside, so that we don't have to go back to town meeting. The hope, as you correctly point out, there is some swing to this, but we wanted to have something that was conservative enough so that we wouldn't have to come back.
Understood.
And then whatever we don't spend still will stay within the parameters of the project.
Got it. So it's just a matter of the timing of the town meeting. That's all.
In the way that the process works, because I think Stephen Nudie said this a few times, and Steve, I don't want to steal your words, but we want to try to go back to town meeting as few times as possible. I mean, it's unfortunate we even need to do this, but I think it was pointed out to me by Steve Mark. I mean, I think we came up with a $700,000 figure 2 years ago. And for those who are in the construction industry and that's seen the type of inflation that's been coming on and rearing its head, this is probably some component of that.
Yeah.
Even though this is even though these are professionals that are still doing the same thing, but it's all that. I think inflation does play a little bit of a factor here, and the hope is that it may not be that big a problem, Brian. But at the same time, we want to scope it in a way so that we have enough that it's sufficient.
Yeah, and if you wait until Springtown meeting, that's months you lose in the feasibility portion, that you might not be able to sign a contract with an architectural firm through the OPM process to start that work. So
I get it now. My question, Brian addressed my question. It's just a matter of the town meeting. So I'm good with that. Thank you.
So there are four of us on this call that have to jump off in about 7 minutes to go to another meeting. So Steve, can you give us a little rundown on the financial part?
I think Ryan basically did a good job in explaining it. I mean, we have $385,000 available. As he mentioned, anything that we don't spend stays right back into the project. We may have to change some language at a future town meeting to get it reappropriated, but it's still within the project. And then the reimbursements we get in also stay within the project. So that's about it. I mean, the 385 it's kind of maxing us out as to available funds, because we don't want to have to go back to town meeting in case. Hopefully we're spending less than this total. So I have a motion if we're ready for that, Steve.
Yeah, as I understand it, we have to make a motion to recommend this to put this on the warrant.
I wrote one out. I'll move that the Shaker Lane Building Committee recommend adding $385,000 to the Shaker Lane School feasibility study, and ask that the Select Board add an article to the special town meeting warrant for November 1st, 2023.
Second.
All in favor? We'll do a roll call vote. Kelly?
Aye.
Stacy? Stacy on?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Michelle?
Aye.
Stephen Udi?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
And Chuck?
Dr. Costa's aye.
Oh, and me. Yes. Steve Moore, yes. Motion carries.
Yeah, you.
Yeah. Other comments before we adjourn? So the next meeting, I think, is kind of up in the air. We're kind of out of cadence. We're up against the PMBC meeting tonight as we were 2 weeks ago. so we need to get back on cadence, but we'll send out a notice when we have something important to discuss.
Motion to adjourn.
So one last question.
Yeah.
Is there directions to go on the contract with the OPM at this point in time? Or are we
Well,
waiting for additional information before we move forward with that contract?
Well, I think the only way to negotiate with them is to get a breakdown of their costs and look at the hourly rates per person. And if we think one person might be a little overpriced, we might ask them to, adjust the hourly rate. And then any other ODCs, other direct costs, whatever makes up their proposal. We don't know what makes up their proposal right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Chuck's made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Aye.